difference that makes to when we stop and listen to it?
Yeah, let's try it now. Holy crap, it made a huge difference.
We have multiple degrees between us, but we're always spoiled by technology.
This is like our millennial anthem.
I don't understand. Pretend I have that thing on my guitar that shoots flames out that Pete has at Fall Out Boy concerts.
Oh, God.
See, this is why we start recording early, so we capture these gems.
All the zaniness of our wit.
Speaking of zaniness, we have to start with a little bit of a correction.
Oh, boy.
You said the correct show last week when you referenced Ghost Hunters.
Oh, yes.
But we are so unfortunately lost in the Zach Bagans sauce that we immediately went to Ghost Adventures.
Oh, yes. Those are two different ones.
They are two different ones because I went to watch that episode of Ghost Hunters and I was like, oh, I got it. It's not Ghost Adventures. It's Ghost Hunters. And then I watched Steve and you don't know that show. I think his name's Dave Tango. I don't know. Steve and whatever the skinny guy's name is, like stir up ghosts by playing a violin really terribly and doing a weird like goblin dance on the stage.
Rude.
And I hated it and I turned it off.
Well, the sentiment was correct.
Agreed.
It just was geared towards the wrong person.
Yeah.
For now.
If there's somebody else who wants to watch or like hate watch Ghost Adventures or whatever, I just want them to be able to hate watch the correct thing.
It's not to say like we're two spooky gals, but we just, I guess, ghost hunting shows, I don't watch them personally. I love spooky stuff, obviously, but I am kind of a baby and I don't want to go into haunted places. I don't like the weird spooky vibes I get from them. I want to go home and like sleep well at night. So yeah, I'm a baby and I won't lie. I wouldn't go into like Mansfield Reformatory for a whole evening. I'd be like, no, thank you. That's not my jam.
I mean, I am also a baby, but I think I was reading something recently about how like people with anxiety and depression are drawn to horror because it is a safe way to self-regulate your dysregulated nervous system. Like, you know that there's always going to be a safe outcome. And so when your body is like, oh my God, we're dying, I'm being chased by a bear, this is terrible, but it's because you had to send an email, then you watch someone survive something stressful and you have that catharsis and your body's like, oh, okay, we're out of it now. I can feel better. And so I think that is why I like ghost hunting shows. I also used to, for a living, give ghost tours.
That's true. I don't have that background. So that might be why I don't enjoy watching them.
It's fair. You've also never been sexually harassed by a ghost, which I'm pretty sure happened to me. So
no, I can't claim that. That would be weird. Though supposedly, according to my family, my childhood home might be slightly haunted, but like people that used to live there. So the closest like ghost experience I would have had would have been like my great-great-grandma watching me sleep, which is like not terrible.
She's the ghost.
Okay.
I was waiting for more to it because I was like, oh, your great-great-grandma was there. And then what did you guys see? Oh, wait.
Yeah, she's
okay.
The ghost. Like,
that's nice.
Yeah, I like was laying in bed and then I woke up and I had my eyes like, halfway open because you're like, what time is it? What year is it? And then I like rolled over and I saw like a red-haired lady standing over my bed. And I'm like, And then I opened my eyes fully because I'm like, wait, what? And then I didn't see anything. And I went, that's weird. And then my dad's like, yeah, that's your great-grandma. I'm like, cool.
That's like comforting though. That's nice.
Yeah, it's not, like I said, it's not terrible. I grew up with like a lot of like porcelain dolls and other like things that would be considered kind of spooky. We had some taxidermy in my house too. When I say taxidermy, I always think of like bears, squirrels, big wild animals. We had fish. Like, nothing too spooky, but we still had taxidermy animals at my house.
What's the fish fillet fish? The big mouth bass, Billy the big mouth bass, or whatever his name is.
We did have one of those too.
Yeah. I can't do taxidermy. I immediately turn into Ace Ventura, and when nature calls, and I'm like, this is a lovely room of death, and then I have to excuse myself.
Yeah, I don't have any in my house now because I don't do taxidermy, but I did grow up with that kind of stuff in my house. So
yeah. No, you just have Alf with a surfboard and multiple Chuckies and Freddy staring at us while we record.
Those are not mine. Well, Alf's kind of mine. It was bought with the intention of, like, he's there for me. I lay no claim to the other horror items in this room.
They're not mine either. They're her husband's. Yes. We're just going to clarify that.
And they didn't just magically appear.
But yeah, so that's our slight corrections corner. Please don't yell at us. Maybe you already did. I don't know. Maybe you're the guys that I just made fun of on Ghost Hunters, and you found this, and now you hate us. But I stand by what I said. That episode was terrible. Where was Grant? He was my favorite of you always. Jason's cool, but there was no Grant. I was over it. I
just want to say, if you guys are from that show, thank you for hate watching us and listening to us. So
feels really appropriate that we've gone on this weird hate watching riff right before what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I just put it together, and I promise it was not intentional.
It was not intentional. So here we are today with our second episode. Very exciting. And as always, I'm Beth.
And I'm Britta.
And you're here with the Lake Erie Library, and today we are going to talk about some true crime. This is considered one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the state of Ohio, which is, I think, kind of interesting. And we're going to talk about the Circleville Letter mystery, which, before we start and get into it, can I just say, it sounds, when you say Circleville Letter mystery, it sounds like, one, because not only do I read spooky stuff, I also read, like, romance novels, so it sounds like this would be like the beginning of a meet cute for, like, a cute romance novel where letters are sent back and forth.
It truly sounds like the beginning of, like, a BBC4 cozy mystery show with, like, oh no, Eunice, I've lost all the post. The post has fallen in the creek. How are we going to get everyone's Christmas letters back?
Jane, I have no idea. We have to go find... Wait, I found a goose print. We have to go find the goose.
And then the goose is voiced by, like, I don't know, like Jack Davenport or someone with a deliciously deep British man voice. Matthew MacFadyen. I don't know. What is he doing after Succession anyway? Maybe we should pitch this to him.
So... yeah, it sounds like really nice, but it's a pretty wild story that we're going to get into. And we're going to start with I'm going to talk to you about the city of Circleville, first of all. They're the county seat of Pickaway County. They have a population of 13,927 as of the 2020 census. This started in the 70s, so back then it would have been like 12,000 people. They literally have a water tower painted like a giant pumpkin, and that is because they are home to the Circleville Pumpkin Show, the biggest festival in the United States dedicated to pumpkin. This is fair because their attendance, like last time they did it, it's a free festival. It's over 4 days long. They had over 400,000 people flood the city of Circleville.
Yeah, I looked at their website. I still have it pulled up to give like some info at the end of the episode, but their website for the pumpkin show it claims that they're like the third largest festival in the United States, which I want to see how they compare it to the Gettysburg Apple Festival, because I know that's like huge too. So I feel like that's probably also in the top 3 somewhere. But
this is also just very Midwestern of us to be like, yes, the Circleville Pumpkin Fest, great time. Like, you know, there's always like an apple festival, a corn festival,
Strawberry Festival,
Watermelon Festival.
What's up, Mylan?
So, like, everywhere is different, like, festivals we got. Even the famous one with Dick Goddard, the Woolly Bear Festival. Yeah, I just feel like if you're not having a fall festival in the state of Ohio, let alone the Midwest in the fall, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? Anyways, so let's start. Let's begin. So the letters, which are deemed from the author, the Circleville Writer, began in 1976. The first letter went to bus driver Mary Gillespie, and it was handwritten and accused her of having an affair with the superintendent, which is Gordon Massey.
Yeah, Massey.
And the letter had no return address, and it was postmarked from Columbus. So Mary got this letter. It's like this incriminating letter that's like, I know you're sleeping with your husband, or not your husband. I know you're sleeping with your
husband. Please keep it down.
That would be so tame compared to what I'm going to tell you. So this letter is like, I know you have children. I know you have a family. I know you're like basically breaking up your family because you're sleeping with the superintendent of the school. She herself was a bus driver for the school system. So this was, pretty wild.
I have some of them. I'm trying to see if I have that first letter.
So while you're looking at that, she kept that letter to herself at first. She's like, okay, this is perturbing. I don't want to deal with it, but
I think this is it.
Okay.
Stay away from Massey. And this is, you're probably going to go into this later, but it's handwritten. It's all in like these block letters, and it's on the lined paper where, like, when you learn in elementary school how to make your letters, and it has 3 lines for like each row.
Right.
And it's taking up all 3 lines. So there's also no punctuation except for like colons and a few periods. So it says, stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about knowing him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious. Everyone concerned has been notified and everything will be over soon.
So she was like, okay, that's disturbing. So then 8 days later, she got another letter. And then Ron, her husband, got one. So once Ron got one, they were like talking to him. She's like, I'm not having an affair. She's like reassuring him, like, this is fake accusations. And then they also told their brother-in-law, Paul Freshour?
I think it's Freshour. He was married to Karen Sue, who was Ron Gillespie's sister.
Yes. So, cast of characters so far. You got the superintendent, Gordon Massey. You got Mary, the bus driver, Mary Gillespie, who is married to Ron Gillespie. And then Karen Sue is Ron's sister, and she is married to Paul Freshour.
And then I saw that they also told Paul's sister, and those were the only people that they told about it.
I won't lie. As we dig into this, I'm sure, and as we compare notes, there are some inconsistencies in the research, and it's a little frustrating, which also I think adds to the mystery of it, because we have not figured out who was the writer of this. There are theories, but there's no definitive, like, this is the person who did it. So they decided, these were weird letters, but then more of them arrived. So they kind of told one another, they're like, okay, but then more arrived. And they started to get more threatening in nature. They threatened to go public with the affair, and they wanted to announce it over CB radio, TVs, and billboards. I think I have the letter for that. Defender, you are also, it's hard to read this one, inform the school board on CBS, posters, signs, billboards, only pick rides, motorcycles. So essentially they were threatening more and more. So then Mary theorized that the letters were, because they were like, who could be writing this? Mary theorized that these letters were coming from another bus driver, that they were like a jilted crush. I won't call him a lover because Mary didn't have a relationship with them. Like, this person, this other bus driver, like, hit on her and was trying to make a move, and Mary's like, no, thank you. So Paul turned around and was like, well, I'll write a letter to who we think is the person, and we'll claim we know who you are. And for a few weeks, this seemed to work, and the letters stopped. They also, one of the things I forgot to mention is that as things were starting to escalate, they wanted to include, the letters were talking about including signs about the daughter. So Mary and Ron's daughter, her name is Tracy. She was 12 at the time.
Yeah.
And they claimed that they were going to write signs that said that Massey and Tracy were having a relationship, which is pretty, like, incendiary, especially this is 1976.
Yeah.
Like,
some of these letters are, like, really, I mean, later it gets pointed out that there were no, like, truly direct threats against Gillespie herself in these letters, but there is one that says they're gonna come and, like, shoot her daughter in the head.
Right. Like, they're not. So as I said, Circleville Letters sounds like they would be, like, nice and cute and sweet, but they're none of that. They're kind of dark. So the letters seem to stop for a few weeks. Great. But then, which is also weird, on August 19th, 1977, I say that's weird because it's like close to an anniversary date of when we're recording this.
Yeah,
Wild.
by the time you're listening to it, this is well in the past, but this is literally a day after that when we're recording it.
So Ron received a phone call from the Circleville writer. And in fact, this call upset Ron so much, and it also seemed to confirm his suspicions of the writer's identity. So the writer claimed that he was in Ron's yard, like, watching him. So then Ron was like, all right. So he grabbed his gun and then he took his truck and he left the property, even though the writer said he was on the property watching him. So then Ron, a few minutes later, was found dead. And he was found dead in his truck, which had crashed into a tree nearby. Investigators were looking into this because obviously that's pretty wild. And they found one bullet discharged from Ron's gun before he crashed. But they also found that his blood alcohol content was twice the legal limit. So he had been, like, drinking heavily before he had crashed his car. And which,
according to his family, was not normal for him. Like, he was not a heavy drinker.
Right. So that was one thing that was off. Also, even though the gun was fired, there was no casing found at the scene of the death and the crash. The sheriff found Ron's death as an accident. He's like, there's literally nothing else that, like, proves it otherwise. And he said that he died by crashing his car into a tree. Paul, however, thought that this was murder. He thought that there was foul play afoot here. And soon after Ron's death, other residents started receiving letters stating that Sheriff Radcliffe was involved in covering up Ron's murder. And that also Mary and Gordon Massey, who ironically were not having an affair before the letters happened, but they got together after the letters started being sent out. So these new letters after Ron's death were claiming that Mary and Gordon were behind Ron's death and that the sheriff was covering it up.
Yeah. I think that's what this one is. It's like, they are still together. Two teenage boys seen what happened. You always use high speed for and this is elimination is spelled incorrectly. Elimination of someone. If you must get rid of them, you don't fire shots for drinking. There were many booby traps at the schools, but no one could admit it for public scare. They can now. Signs and letters will not stop. Mary was not a teacher, only a bus driver. Ratcliffe does not allow media unless approved by him. There are signs in Grove City restaurants. The police lied.
So, pretty incendiary claims here. But according to Paul, initially the sheriff thought that there was foul play involved in Ron's death. And he changed his mind because he had, like, a suspect in mind, but he took the suspect for a polygraph test, and the suspect passed the polygraph test. He wasn't lying. So he's like, well, I can't throw him in jail if I think he passed a polygraph test. I'm not really sure. How often are polygraph tests used? Like, how accurate are those?
They're not incredibly accurate. Like, they can use them, I guess, in terms of like when they're interrogating people. It seems like more as like an intimidation thing where you can be like, oh, well, you didn't pass the polygraph test, so I know you're lying. But there's so many reasons why you might not get an accurate baseline. Like,
right. Like, if you're anxious, I feel like you would not get an accurate baseline. If
I were accused of a crime that I knew I did not commit and I was being forced to take a polygraph test, you can bet my heart rate would be through the roof. So I cannot imagine that they would get like a normal reading on me to then judge anything else by it. They'd be like, she's lying about not even doing anything. I asked if she was sitting in a chair and she said yes, and it's a lie.
So, this was also in the 70s, so I don't know how, like, criminal justice has changed over the years. We have different technology now than we did in the 70s. Like, we have, DNA and all that stuff now. But they let go of the suspect anyways. So then letters still kind of came and went, and they didn't affect Mary. They also affected other people, and they also accused them of like other heinous things. But then in February of 1983, Mary was beginning to be harassed on her bus route. So threatening signs were placed on the road. It got to the point where she was just like, she was sick and tired of it. They were threatening her. They were talking about her daughter, Tracy, who, was a little bit older, but still a teenager at the time. So one day she decided to rip one down. And this is pretty wild. And she found a booby trap behind the sign. And it was found that it was a box that contained a small pistol. So had she not ripped the box off the way she did, she would have been shot. It was probably intended to at least maim her, if not kill her.
Correct. And she took the box home with her and then showed it to the police, which is how this takes the turn that it does.
Yes. So the police investigate the box, and they investigate the gun, because the thinking is whoever the gun belongs to would have wrote the letters. There was even a bad attempt on the gun to have the serial numbers like rubbed off, but they were still able to find out who the gun belonged to. It belonged to Paul, Mary's brother-in-law. Well, yeah. Ex-brother-in-law, since Ron is...
Well, yes. At this time that this is happening, Paul and Karen Sue were going through a divorce, and it was
nasty, right?
Really nasty divorce,
yeah.
like to the point where they had 3 children, and like the daughters were like sort of like forced to take sides in this, and then they have a son who sort of, well, we don't know, this is speculation, but like people have said that Karen Sue kind of made it impossible for him to be on his dad's side about anything, and so he kind of distanced himself from his father at that point.
Right. Paul claimed that the gun was stolen, and Paul was like, it wasn't me, and he was claiming innocence this entire process. The sheriff, however, did have Paul come in and had him do a handwriting test. Paul failed the handwriting test because they found that Paul's handwriting and the handwriting of the letters were a match. Now, the letters are written in like blocky letters, so I am not a handwriting expert. I cannot claim any validity to this.
I have some information about this later once we get through this.
But they did have a handwriting expert witness look at Paul's handwriting and the letters' handwriting, and this expert handwriting person said, yeah, these are a match. So Paul was arrested and put to trial not for the actual letter writing. That was just used as evidence. He was put to trial for the attempted murder of his sister-in-law, Mary. Now, I will say Mary and them at first thought that was kind of wild that the gun belonged to Paul, because at that point, there's no real motive for Paul to have wanted to kill Mary.
Yeah, they were like incredibly close.
Yeah.
Like it was, these two couples, these two families that sort of did everything together. They were related. It was a big extended family. And there's really no signs of animosity or hatred or anything.
Right. Especially because, like, if you think about it, when the letters were first happening, it was Paul that's like, I'm going to write a letter back and we're going to fix this. We're going to finish this.
Right. And he also, when they brought him in for questioning about this, like, he completely complied on every aspect. He, like, didn't fight. He's like, yes, I'll take a polygraph. Yes, I'll give you handwriting samples. I didn't do this. So for him to so willingly go along with this,
right, like,
is strange if he is in fact the letter writer and the person who tried to kill his sister-in-law.
Right. Unfortunately, as I said, he failed the handwriting test. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder. And then in October, he went to trial for attempted murder. And then he wasn't charged with writing the letters, but he was charged with the attempted murder. So he went to jail. They said between 7 and 25 years, which is a long sentence. However, the letter writing didn't stop once Paul went to jail. And actually, Paul got letters while he was in jail. He was in a correctional institute based out of Lima, and the letter still had the postmarking from Columbus. So he got letters, and he's in solitary confinement. So there's the correctional institute's like, he's in solitary confinement because we don't want him to have pen and paper, but there's no way that he could be writing these letters.
Yeah, and I mean, even if he was allowed any time out of solitary, like, you have no privacy when you're in a facility like that. Your mail gets read and looked through. Anything that you send out gets inspected. So it would have been almost impossible for him to be writing these letters or getting them out and having someone send them from Columbus. But there is some speculation that he might have mass-produced letters before he went to jail and then had someone send them while he was in. But that doesn't explain why he would then also send them to himself, I guess, unless it was to throw people off the scent. But, like, this one it's like mocking him. It says, fresh hour. Now when are you going to believe you aren't getting out of there? I told you 2 years ago when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all? No one wants you out. No one. The joke is on you. Ha ha. Tell no one of this letter. I saw the paper. Great news. Great. The sheriff loved it. Ha ha. Do you believe it now? Do you?
God, it's very mocking. Oh, God. So the letters they started to dwindle by the 90s. So, like they were still happening throughout the 80s because this was 83. He actually didn't get an early release from prison. He was like a good prisoner, what they call a model prisoner, but he did not get released for good behavior because of the letters.
Yeah, the first time he came up for parole, they denied it because the letters were still being sent.
Like, oh, God, terrible. So eventually, Paul was released in 1994 and still maintained his innocence throughout the entire process.
Yeah, he actually went to the FBI and asked them to reopen this case to help prove his innocence when he got out.
Right. He actually passed away in 2012, so he never found out the identity of the writers, and unfortunately, that he never really got his name cleared either of being a potential letter writer.
I think he just understood that, like, this was never going to be separated from him, probably even if he did prove his own innocence, because he said at one point something along the lines of, like, even when I'm in my grave, people are still going to say it's me.
Right. Like, we're talking about it now. This continued. There was actually in the 90s, Unsolved Mysteries was made and filmed. And actually, with Unsolved Mysteries, a postcard, not a whole letter, but a postcard was written to Unsolved Mysteries that said, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, you L sickos will pay the Circleville writer." There's also a lot of colons instead of... So there is some punctuation, but it's all like...
That's the only punctuation is just colons, and like there's maybe 2 periods I saw in any of them. Other than that, there's no punctuation.
But it's almost like a telegram, like, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Stop."
Yeah. Full stop. It's wild.
So they like looked into it in 2006. Another investigator looked into it. Their name is hold on a second, let me pull it up.
I watched the Unsolved Mysteries episode of this. You can find it on YouTube. I'm not encouraging like piracy of any part for legal reasons, but you can just type it into YouTube and the full episode is on there, which then brought up like memories of my childhood of like how disturbing the beginning of Unsolved Mysteries always was.
So Martin Yant, who is an investigator, suggests that there were actually 3 letter writers, none who were Paul. So he believes that one was the superintendent son, so Gordon's son, who Mary had an affair with. The second letter writer was a coworker who was infatuated with Mary, so that would have been the bus driver. The third was believed to be Karen Sue, Ron's ex-wife. It's believed. So on the day of the booby trap, Paul actually had a alibi. But the evidence, there was a witness who saw somebody putting up the sign, and it didn't match Paul's description.
No, so it was another bus driver who went on the route roughly 20 minutes before Mary drove through, and she saw the sign. And she said that she saw a large, sandy-haired man standing next to an El Camino. I just heard my stomach gurgle, so I apologize if that came through on like the most dramatic part of this. So it was a sandy-haired man and an El Camino, and she said that as she drove by, he turned around like he was like peeing, so she couldn't see him. But she did see this man who did not fit Paul's description and this El Camino, which at the time, Karen Sue's brother owned an El Camino that looked like that. And Karen Sue had a boyfriend who was a large, sandy-haired man.
So, even though there was evidence to the contrary that Paul did not write these letters, the police still maintained that Paul did it. The case was also parodied on Drunk History.
I just watched it today.
Was it good?
It's so good.
Oh,
It's
I feel bad.
Oh, she used to be on Saturday Night Live, and I can't remember her name, but she's like the Mary Gillespie character in it. And the person who's doing the Drunk History, it's Georgia Harstark from My Favorite Murder.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really good.
Well, then I'll have to watch it.
It's really stupid, but it's really good. And it's the same episode. They start at like an Unsolved Mysteries episode, and it's Drunk History, Drunk Mystery. And they talk about Agatha Christie staging her own disappearance, and
nice.
There's like a third one that was in it too. It was very funny though.
And then you watched the 48-hour episode as well.
I did watch the 48 hours, and there's a lot of information that I wrote down from that because I knew you hadn't seen it. So they go into it on the 48 hours episode about how initially, before Paul was considered a suspect, Karen Sue went to the police and told them that it was her husband. And the reason she had for this was that she said she found a letter torn up in the toilet as though he was trying to get rid of it, and that she found other letters in the house. But it was also very convenient to say if Karen Sue herself was writing the letters and was trying to frame her husband
right
while they were going through a terrible divorce.
Right. Because at that point, Karen Sue would have motive, right? Like, husband's away, like, they're getting divorced, so she would get stuff out of the divorce, I would imagine.
Yeah, and so if he was in jail, she'd essentially get everything, including, like, her kids back, because her daughters were kind of, like, split on the matter, especially with the divorce. And also, it would make sense if she, for some reason, got a bee in her bonnet that her sister-in-law was cheating on her brother, that she would start sending these letters to her. But there's also a person interviewed in the 48 Hours episode. Her name is Pam. I'm going to see if I wrote down her last name somewhere. Pam Stanton. She was a family friend of the Fresh Hours. She was, she was like a kid or a young adult at this time. She called Paul like Uncle Paul. He was like a second dad to her. She still to this day maintains that he's innocent. And so she said that Karen Sue had this kind of a bullying nature to her. And when Unsolved Mysteries came to town to film the interviews, Pam claims that Karen Sue sat in her car across the street from where they were interviewing people and took pictures and wrote down the names of every single person who went in to talk. And she would do this. She would make notes of things that were at PTA meetings, like, oh, well, so-and-so said this and did that. And so that was just sort of her nature of knowing everybody's business.
Which all small towns have a busybody, right?
Yeah. And so this also kind of adds fuel to the argument that it was her because she would know all of this.
Right.
She has all this information about people. She's going to send letters to them. So again, this is all speculation. There's no proof that it's Karen Sue, but this is one possible theory. Another thing that Pam brought up is that Paul at some point said to someone before the booby-trapped sign that he thought Mark, his son, had stolen his gun.
Oh.
And then this gun ends up in this attempted murder.
Right. And Mom, as we know, Mom was also swaying son, Mark, for...
Correct.
Various reasons. And
the whole time that Paul was in jail, Mark never visited him in prison. He told Pam, I just can't, and would not elaborate on why he was not allowed to. And when it was asked to her, well, why wouldn't Paul say that then to save himself? She's like, no. Uncle Paul would rather die than see Mark go to jail. He would never do that. And so it is her thought that he took the rap and went to jail to keep his own son out. And then, sadly, in 2002, on September 11th, they found Mark's body floating in the Scioto River nearby, and he had died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And so Pam believes that was Mark's way of finally being free of the guilt of what happened that he had carried for so long. And his mother, Karen Sue, at that time said that he had been struggling with depression for years prior to this. So this all kind of adds weight to that same argument. On the 48 Hours special, they did have 2 handwriting analyses. During the trial, they had agreed that there were similarities between the letters and Paul's handwriting.
Right.
With 48 Hours, they asked former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole to look at the letters. This is her career. She did this with the Green River killer.
Oh, okay.
And she also worked on the Unabomber case.
Just
low
profile cases.
She knows her stuff. So she is fairly certain that it was one person who wrote all of the letters. She thinks that it's a female because they kept using this manipulative language for the reader of saying I'm the boyfriend of a woman or my girl. And the way it was used throughout the letters, it felt very much like, I want you to think that I am not a woman. I want you to think I'm a man.
Interesting.
So she thinks that's intentional. She examined 98 letters, and she studied the word choices and the grammar. And deducted,
what grammar?
Right. Well, and she deduced from that it's not a highly educated person, which is another count against Paul because he had a master's degree. He was a manager at his work. Was it Anheuser-Busch? Is that where he worked?
That sounds right.
So this is an educated man.
And these letters, as we told you, have grammatical errors. They have spelling errors. They have no punctuation.
Correct. And so she also said you can tell that this writer is really enjoying themselves and they don't care that they're hurting people. And normally that indicates that they have some kind of personality disorder. And this probably would have also been a person who in their everyday life would be sort of a bully or intimidating, which does not describe Paul at all.
No.
It does sort of describe Karen Sue, though.
Look, we are obviously not experts by any means. We're just giving you the evidence we have found.
It is really easy to sit here with all of this information in one go, too, as compared to being
years.
the people on the case
Yes.
while it's happening.
Yes.
So
I can't even imagine like being the sheriff and like having to figure out like the mystery behind. I mean, obviously, like Ron's death is weird, and if like Karen Sue, so let's say Karen Sue was the writer, it still doesn't explain like how Ron's gun went off.
there's also and maybe this is more conflicting information, but I think on both Unsolved Mysteries and 48 Hours, they mentioned that when Ron died, when he got that phone call, Karen Sue and Mary Gillespie were on vacation together. They were driving to Florida.
So there would have been no way for them to like, I gotta make a phone call.
Yeah, unless she stopped at like a gas station and used a payphone to call home and say this, but
why would you say that to your brother?
right,
Like
wouldn't
that,
he recognize her voice?
well, that's the theory that he
Oh, but
knew who the person was.
this is now taking on like my biggest pet peeve with Shakespearean stories of why didn't you just say like the blatant thing and ask the question then? Because if like Beth called me and was just like, "Hey, I'm in your front yard. I'm the writer. I know what you're doing," and I recognized her voice, I would just go, "Beth, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? This is stupid." I would not charge off into the night
Drunk. Which that's another thing too. Why was he drinking so heavily if he's not a drinker?
Yeah, I don't know. They also, on the 48 Hours, they had Beverly Ease, who's a forensic handwriting expert, look at the letters. And so she looked for distinct writing patterns and similarities. And she said that the G's in these letters look like the number 6 and that's unusual.
That would be fair.
That's one thing.
I had a hard time reading some of them.
And then there's an instance of the like zip code. There are these 3s or 2s. It could be either one of them. It looks like he was unsure, whoever the writer was unsure of who, like what if it was a 3 or a 2, like 3113 or 2112. And so she found letters that Paul had written to family members where he had made this similar like mistake or change. So in her mind, she said she would go to court and swear on a Bible that it's Paul who wrote these. She said that these patterns are like the G's that look like 6s, and this weird mistake is too much similarity for her. She says that she would be willing to testify that it's him. But she also admits that there are patterns that don't look like his patterns. So she's pretty sure of herself, but you know, she would not say, you know, well, I have an explanation for that, because she doesn't have an explanation for that.
Right.
She also said that his fingerprints were on the letters that were postmarked while he was in prison.
That's weird.
And hundreds of letters were sent out during that time, but there's no way he could have sent them or got them out. So that's where the theory that maybe he wrote them all ahead of time and had someone else mail them came from. And then in the drunk history episode at the end, they decided they were going to solve the mystery. And Georgia and the host of Drunk History theorized that Mary wrote the letters herself.
Oh, that's a spicy take.
Yeah. And so they said she's a bus driver.
Right.
Kids talk.
Right.
This would have been prime way to get all of this gossip and information on people's lives without anybody suspecting it, by just listening to these kids on her bus route every day.
All right, that's a fair point. But then the question is, why would she accuse herself of having an affair?
Maybe to throw her husband off the scent of an affair that was happening. And she could be like, this is so crazy. I can't believe that someone thinks I'm having an affair. That's so wild, Ron. Why would anyone think that? Like you wouldn't think that, would you? See, I'm getting away with it. And that's where that she stole the gun from her brother-in-law to then stage an attempt on her life to also make it seem like it's not her.
Well, I guess that would also explain how she was able to unbooby the booby trap.
Exactly.
because, you know, like, what are the chances that she was able to take that off without the gun going off?
And, like, how many other signs were booby-trapped and nobody knew? Like, it's weird that it was just that one.
The one she was like, I'm so fed up with this, I need to... But then at the same time, if she were the writer, like, why is she writing that stuff about her kid? Like, as a mom, I could tell you, if someone were writing stuff about my kid, especially, like, predatory type stuff, I'd be a little feral.
Listen, I'm not a clinician, but people have these behavioral disorders that they do things because of the result it gets. So
I mean, people are talking about her. It's hard to say. We weren't there in 1976, so we don't know the dichotomy of, like, their lives in this small town. But, you know, to have an affair with a superintendent as a bus driver, like, can you imagine that, like, power dynamic? Like, I don't know. We grew up in what is considered sort of a small town type feel, and I always considered, like, the superintendent, like, kind of top dog, right? They're getting the most money and stuff like that, and then, like, a bus driver is having an affair with them. I did want to say there's also two other turns and mysteries. I want further things to that makes this mysterious is in the 1990s, a new suspect emerged because in 1993, a prison inmate named Thomas Lee Dillon sent a letter to the Columbus Dispatch claiming responsibility. So he wrote the Circleville Letters. He had a history of violent behavior and was already serving a life sentence of murder. So he was already imprisoned, and he said that he did it. The authorities did investigate his claim and found several similarities between his writing style and the letters. However, they could not conclusively link him to the crimes, so he was never charged. And then, this is the one I was remembering, but so in 2006, a former police officer named James Renner began investigating the case. He grew up in Circleville, and he began to uncover new evidence and interviewed several individuals who claimed to have knowledge of the case. His investigation led him to a new suspect, former school superintendent named Dwight L. Bowman. According to Renner, Bowman had a motive for sending the letters as he had been fired from his position as superintendent and had a grudge against several of the individuals who received the letters. However, Bowman died in 2009, so the authorities were unable to question him. So I'll throw two more theories in the pot. I can tell you, like, since the 48 Hours episode, which is newer, like, there's still things being written about the Circleville Letters. Like, this is still, like, a mystery people are still discussing. It's still something that, like, CBS News wrote about, like, in 2022.
Yeah, and at this point, honestly, I mean, so many of these people involved in this have since passed away that, like, there is a possibility that we just will never have an answer for this because that person took it to their grave, you know? So it's Drunk History, Season 5, Episode 7, if you want to watch the silly one. 48 Hours, Season 35, Episode 18, and then the Unsolved Mysteries. If you just type in Unsolved Mysteries Circleville Letters, you will undoubtedly find it on YouTube.
Right.
Are you wrapping up? Are you ready to talk about some pumpkins or
some 1,200-pound pumpkins? Absolutely. I was just gonna say, there are other people. So besides the cast of characters, which I hate saying that because this is true. This is a true story. This is true crime. But besides the people we discussed, like other citizens in Circleville, because hundreds of letters were sent out, were sent threatening letters. So then the question is like, you know, your life is essentially being, like, upended a little bit because you're getting this, like, letter about your kid. Things like I'm going to shoot your child in the head and stuff like that. And, like, I just can't imagine. That would be the only thing, like, if I lived in Circleville and I, like, my parents grew up in that or something like that, like, you almost want to know because it's, like, people can't be writing that kind of stuff. Even though, let's be honest, on the internet, people write that kind of stuff every day.
It's called Reddit.
Or just anonymous comments on YouTube.
Burner accounts.
Love it. Almost a precedent for that, but more harmful because it resulted in murder. or death, depending on your take on Ron's
At
untimely end.
At least a death and one attempted murder.
Yes. So yeah, thank you, Circleville, for, having this grisly history with like such a joyous occasion like the pumpkin fest, which has been going on a really, really long time, since 1901. So I guess we'll end on a light note.
Yeah, it says it started in, well, this is 1903, but in the very early years of the 1900s, they started it, and then like every year it sort of grew and grew, and they keep it. It's free. There's no entrance for it. They have like a world record for the world's largest pumpkin pie,
which I would like to try.
I feel like it would be so gross though, sitting out for people to look at it by the time you could eat it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I just want to see a ginormous pie, but I also love pumpkin pie.
Yeah, it was 14 feet in diameter, 360 pounds of sugar, 795 pounds of pumpkin, 60 pounds of powdered milk, 60 dozen eggs, 75 gallons of water, 400 pounds of flour, 15 people to mix, and 10 hours to bake.
Oh my God.
And they have like a contest for the largest pumpkins.
How do they bake it? Like,
it has to be some kind of like either industrial oven or like an outdoor specialty oven of some kind.
10 hours.
Yeah. And their stats for the 2022 largest pumpkin contest, the largest pumpkin was 1,837 and a half pounds.
That's a big boy.
Yeah. The second came in at 1,438 pounds, and the third at 1,347 pounds.
Good God.
They also have a Miss Pumpkin contest, the Miss Pumpkin Show contest, which is like the normal pageants you find at these sort of festivals. And then they have a Little Miss Pumpkin Show. Look how stinking cute these kids are. They're so adorable.
They
and
all
their
have
tiny crowns.
Yeah, they all
sashes.
have autumnal attire on, like with little pumpkins and stuff. That's so cute.
Yeah, they're so adorable. But yeah, it's like a fair. They have rides. It is always the third Wednesday through Saturday in October. So this year it is October 18th through 21st in 2023.
Nice. So if you're interested in going to like a ginormous festival in Circleville, that would be the place to go, and the time to go, I guess.
Yeah, just leave your weird blocky handwritten notes at home.
Yeah, we don't need that. It's called the internet. Just use that now.
Please don't do this. Don't start it again. We're not encouraging anyone to do that.
We don't encourage murder or mayhem.
No, just goose chaos with the goose has stolen the post. Oh no. Read, darling. My Christmas letters. No worry, ladies. I've caught the culprit.
This would be especially terrifying for you.
I would hate this.
Yeah.
A goose is a menace no matter where it is, in my opinion. I do not want it to be stealing my personal information.
One of my siblings calls Canadian geese sentinels of Satan, and I call them that too now because it's good.
They are the frat boys of the bird world.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because there's always one that like is more outspoken and tries to pick a fight with you, and then as soon as you acknowledge it, the rest of them are like, "What up, bro? What up, bro? What up, bro?" And then they all start chasing you.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, stay spooky, our friends, and we hope you enjoyed listening about the one of the best kept mysteries in the state of Ohio.
Yeah. Please follow us on Instagram at Lake Erie, that's EERIE Library, and subscribe, comment, that helps us.
Yep. And join us next time for some other spooky content.
Honk.